Vice President Kamala Harris is in Savannah today with Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. They've been there the last 2 days as they really begin their road trip. They've been to Michigan, Nevada, Arizona. They have been to North Carolina. And so they continue their focus, really looking at expanding the map. And Georgia is a critical state for them to pick up. We're going to get to that a little bit later. But I want to start this way because I tell you, I posted something on Instagram and the social media with regards to an economic proposal of Vice President Kamala Harris. What she wants to do is increase the capital gains tax. In addition, raise the corporate tax as well as the tax rate for high income households. Now, when I talked about the capital gains tax, all of a sudden, a bunch of different people started commenting and started saying, oh, my God, this is going to be awful for middle class voters. And I'm like, what are y'all talking about? Her proposal is only going to affect people who have $100 million or more. Literally, if you've got $99 million, you're not impacted. 90 million, you're not impacted. So I reached out to economist Morgan Harper. Morgan, of course, she is with the American Economic Liberties Project, and she joins us from Columbus, Ohio. So Morgan, let's walk through this because, again, these folks were just commenting and saying all sorts of stuff. And I was like, what are y'all talking about? So let's deal with these three particular things we're talking about here. They want to raise the corporate tax rate. Correct me if I'm wrong. Donald Trump lowered it. President Biden, they actually increased it. What does that mean when we say they want to raise the corporate tax rate?
The proposal on the table is that corporations will have to pay more of the money that they are earning, the revenue that they generate. And so Trump lowered it, as you said, to 21%. The proposal from the Biden administration and now Vice President Harris has said that she's endorsing a lot of Biden's tax proposals is to move it back up to 20%. Most people agree, and this is not refuted information, that the lowering of the corporate tax rate has cost America, United States government, billions of dollars. And so bringing that level back up to 27% is going to provide a lot more resources for the government to invest in critical infrastructure and other projects that we've seen already over the last couple of years.
Now, Morgan, here's what's interesting. When I talked to the Black Futures Lab, when they did their survey of 211,000 people, a significant number of African Americans did not want the corporate tax rate raised. And when I asked them the question, they said because many of those workers, their employers have been telling them, oh, if the corporate tax rate is raised, it's bad for business and you might be out of a job. That's literally what they're saying. And for the people who don't know, give folks an historical understanding of what the corporate tax rate and even the personal income tax rate used to be in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, this is what's crazy is, yeah, we're at historic low levels. And so when companies are telling us that they won't be able to pay their workers, or they're telling their workers directly that, that's just kind of nonsense. And we're starting to see, a lot of the roosters kind of come home to roost here with some of this misinformation. Because, from 1909, 2024, like the corporate tax rate was averaging in the 30%. It hit a high in the 60s of over 50%. So we're not even in the range of something as close to that. But I will note, I think this is important to know, with the 1960s rate, that was generally considered to be one of the most innovative and productive periods economically in American history. And so this idea that somehow it's either we make everybody pay their fair share of taxes or we have an economy that actually lifts up the middle class, that these are somehow in contradiction of each other is just nonsense and not accurate based on history. Ooh, I lost the sound again.
Sorry, that's on me. Okay. Let's now deal with the capital gains tax. Okay, so the capital gains tax is 20%. She wants to raise it to 44.6%. All the crypto boys and everybody are all freaking out. And as I said, all these people on my Instagram page are talking about, oh, this is going to hurt middle income tax people. This impacts people when they sell their home. So can you please explain to folks exactly what this means?
This is another one where the threshold matters. And in some ways, Roland, I have some empathy, sympathy, maybe more so, more accurate, for the folks that were commenting to you on Instagram, because a lot of the news stories, especially out of a lot of conservative outlets, do not include the threshold. So on the capital gains proposal, that is only going to apply if you have more than $1 million in investment income in a year. That is less than 1% of the population. So for most people, the vast, vast, vast majority of Americans, this is not relevant to us. I don't know, and I can't hear you. I don't know. Oh, now I can hear you. Now I can hear you.
Okay. All right. So I want you to start that over again. So what exactly is the threshold, again, that Vice President Kamala Harris is talking about?
For capital gains tax proposal, this increase that would, for the highest of the earners of capital gains, would get them to about 37%. This only applies if you are earning over $1 million in investment income. $1 million. Less than 1% of the U.S. population is in that category. So again, for the vast majority of us, myself included, that you show up, you work a job, you're getting some income. This has nothing to do with us. I don't have $1 million in investment income. I don't know about you. And if you do, well, that is fantastic for you, but that does mean that you are a very wealthy person in the United States of America compared to 99% of the population.
Okay, and so what about? I keep seeing this $100 million threshold as well. Explain, what is that?
So the 100 million threshold applies to unrealized gains. And so we just talked about capital gains. That's when you have an asset, you've actually now sold it, and you've collected the gains or the income from having sold that asset. Another important piece there, actually, that I should clarify too, is we're talking about tradable assets. So these proposals don't have anything to do actually with real estate. There are some proposals that are specific to real estate, but those also don't really kick in unless you've got like a $37 million estate or something like that, right? So we're not really talking about like the person that owns a couple of properties and then, but on the unrealized gains, so you haven't sold it, and this is a very new kind of proposal. You haven't sold the asset, you're just holding on to some of these tradable assets. If you have over $100 million in value there, then you are now going to be subject to this 25% tax. And it's unusual because typically you don't get taxed until you've actually gotten the gains from selling that kind of asset. But why is Vice President Harris making this proposal? I think it's really important. So one, a couple of things. Like we just said, unless you have $100 million in value, this is irrelevant for you. So if we just said $1 million in investment income is only getting to under 1% of the population, you can imagine 100 million. We're getting into like 0.0 something percent of the population at $100 million level. Actually, I think some of the estimates put it at like maybe between 10 and 60,000 people in our over 300 million person country that the unrealized gains proposal is relevant for. But anyway, why are they doing this? Because what now happens is if you have that vast wealth, you can just sit on it for your entire life and borrow against it. So you're able to then say or go to a bank or a lender. Go ahead.
So Morgan, let's unpack that. Let's unpack that. So perfect example. Elon Musk, richest man in the world, in the country, whatever you want to say. So what does Elon Musk do? To buy Twitter, he basically borrows against his stock, buys Twitter for $44 billion. He's not using his actual money. And so what this says is, in layman's terms, what the rich have done in America is they go, oh, I'm not going to sit here and actually divest these assets because I now got to pay the higher tax rate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to live off of my capital gains. So their whole deal about lowering their tax rate. And so, in fact, the other day, Robert Rice was talking about the effective tax rate a lot of these corporations pay. Some of them, it's little as 5, 4, 3, 2, 1%. But same thing, what the rich are doing. And what we're talking about here is a rich folks conversation. Because what started this is, my friend Linda
very rich.
Go ahead.
I would just say not even rich.
Right. I mean, so this is not. Yeah. So, activist Linda Sarsour, because this is why I want to have you on. She posted on my Instagram page. She said that capital gains is when you sell your house, they tax the amount over the purchase price. That impacts ordinary homeowners and middle class folks. That's not what we're talking about here, correct?
Correct. That's not what we're talking about. Capital gains, like we just said, in this proposal, so correct that that's the gain from that transaction, but this specific proposal is talking about if you're in that category, having over $1 million of investment income, and it's talking about tradable assets like stocks, like crypto potentially. We're still figuring out how exactly we're regulating crypto, but definitely stock, and that is usually what a lot of very, very wealthy people, like you just said, like an Elon Musk, are using to finance not only their lifestyles, but their whole financial existence. And it's a total rigged system. And so this is trying to bring some equity and some fairness into the tax code and make sure that everybody's paying their fair share. So we don't have more working class folks that are paying in the double digits of an effective tax rate and corporations and the wealthy that are in the single low digits, which is what we currently have relatively.
Yeah, and again, the people who are scared to death of this are really, 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 really rich people. So I need all these broke ass people, these black folks and others, to stop this nonsense pining for, oh my God, that's going to hurt us tremendously. Oh my goodness, the capital gains. No, the uber rich are the folks who are freaking out by this because they have been getting over like a fat rat, Morgan. So the wealth gap has been increasing, and they have the ability to be able to say, oh, I'm sitting on 1, 2, 3, 4, 500 million, a billion, multiple billions in assets. And so I can just borrow against that, and I'm not paying any taxes on that, and they can live a lavish lifestyle where the rest of us are paying that 25, 28, 30, 32, 35% tax because we don't have that ability. Even if some of us who are African American are making $100, $200, or $300,000, we can't play the game that they're playing.
And it's actually even worse than that, because you can live your whole life. So let's stick with this example of Elon Musk, live your whole life borrowing against these unrealized gains, and then you die, and then you pass them on to your next generation, not a collective next generation, your children, and it's not taxed then either. So this is just like the biggest boondoggle of all time. And again, this isn't about punishing people for being successful. It's about making sure that everybody is paying their fair share into an economy, into the United States, that has facilitated this wealth generation for them by having something like the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, that makes sure that we have a stock market that is one that people trust investing in, that generates these types of returns for very wealthy people. That doesn't just happen. That is an institution that needs to be funded, that needs to pay people to have oversight in order to create this type of opportunity for people to build their wealth and to make this kind of money.
The reason I wanted to have this conversation, because what happens is, folks, you watch these shows, CNBC, Bloomberg, Fox Business, and they start going crazy. Those shows are not for us, okay? They're for rich people. And that's what's going on here. I want to bring my panel here. Rishi Colbert, host of the Rishi Colbert Show, Sirius XM Radio. Dr. Greg Carr, Department of Afro-American Studies at Howard University out of D.C. Lauren Victoria Burke, Black Press USA, joining us from Arlington, Virginia. Because I need, and again, there were so many people who were commenting on the post, and it was so much bad misinformation, Reese. It was driving me crazy. And Tamika Mallory actually posted something that I thought was pretty interesting. I'm trying to pull it up here. And where she was like, yo, we fighting for regular, ordinary folk. We ain't about to fight for a whole bunch of rich folks who don't give a damn about us.
I want to know where all these black ass 100 millionaires are, because I ain't seen one. I don't have any black friends that have yachts. I would like to be acquainted with them. I would like to be acquainted with more black folks that have $1 million in investment income. I don't know where people can't figure out, do black people not have any money at all? Are we all poor under Joe Biden and we can't maybe buy groceries? Or are we all gonna lose our shirt under Kamala Harris administration when they tax unrealized capital gains for people who make over $100 million? Figure it out, because the math is not mathing. But the reality is, to Morgan's point, when they see the headlines, when they see the memes and they see the images, they're leaving out the context. They're leaving out the thresholds. If you have to worry about Kamala Harris's tax proposals, I want your kind of problems. That's the kind of problems I want to have, because that means that a whole lot of other shit I ain't got to really worry about. But the reality is, what's really going to impact the middle class is what Vice President Kamala Harris is proposing. Things like $25,000 for first-time home buyers, homeowners assistance. I know y'all pulling up every little program around the country where y'all think illegal immigrants are getting something. Kamala Harris is saying if you're an American citizen, you're going to get $25,000 homeowners assistance for your down payment if you're a first-time home buyer. $6,000 child tax credit. What they've done with this administration, they gave y'all stimmies. They had the child tax credit. And so let's just come back down to planet Earth, mind your bank account, mind your tax returns, and have tax return, tax bracket problems that are in your lane. Don't worry about what Bezos and Bill Gates and all them got going on. They'll figure out a way to get around the loophole. In the meantime, vote for the candidate that's going to benefit your pocketbooks. And I'm sure that that's Vice President Kamala Harris.
Lauren.
Yeah, certainly the earned income tax credit was a huge success, and that's something that should be duplicated. Also, Trump did give a multi-trillion-dollar tax break to the highest earners. I wanted a little bit of a clarification on something that Morgan said when she said that the wealthiest were living off of their capital gains. Did you mean their dividends or their unrealized or realized capital gains?
So kind of both. I mean, right now where we're operating, that capital gains aren't really taxed in the way that Vice President Harris is proposing. The very wealthy are able to kind of escape having the same level of tax rate for those gains. And then also the other point we were making is the unrealized gains. They can go to a lender, they can go to an institution and say, look, I'm worth hundreds and millions of dollars based on my stock holdings. I'm not saying I'm going to sell them to you, but I'm good for it. So give me the money to finance this transaction that like Roland was saying, to buy Twitter, to buy this mansion. That I'm good for it if push comes to shove, and they never have to touch that $100 million or whatever it is that they have in the stock holdings, those unrealized gains. And so you can kind of go through your life if you're operating at that level and getting more and more financing to pay your day-to-day needs, and then continue to acquire different assets that have value in their own right. And like I said, and then pass that on to your heirs and not really ever pay some kind of tax. And so This is all about trying to make rich people live the same way that we all do, which is we have to pay our taxes.
A lot of people do not ever realize the gains. What they do is they reinvest the dividends into their portfolio and never actually pay taxes on that capital gain. That's typically, I think, what the uber wealthy do. And quite frankly, I think we're talking about such a small group of people, as this is almost on the cusp of being irrelevant, because when we get into the earners that are in the $1 million and $2 million portfolio range, it is a very small group of people, which you actually already said. But I actually think, I was wondering, Morgan, what your opinion was on the non-taxing of the tips, the not taxing tips. What did you think of that proposal?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't looked into that as much, but I do know that folks who are, if you're working and living off of tipped wages, then that is a hustle, and so it's not clear that should all be taxed. But I don't want to go too far on that one because I haven't looked at it as much.
Thank you.
The other thing I would say is in terms of, just real fast.
I'm sorry. No, Morgan, go ahead.
Yeah, just
Morgan, go ahead, then we'll go to Greg.
Okay. Another proposal that's relevant to this, the whole idea of taking the dividends, reinvesting, is Vice President Harris is proposing to increase the tax on stock buybacks. That's another tactic by large corporations to inflate the worth, the value of their stock holdings for all of the executives that tend to hold the most stock, or the original founders. They're proposing to raise that from 1% to 4%. So that would be another way to just inject some equity that, regardless of how wealthy you are, more of that is coming back into the overall pot of money that we the people have control over, which is the government is administering and deciding on our priorities, whether that's to give tax credit for child care or to support higher education for people all over the country.
Greg?
Thank you, Roland, and thank you, Sis Morgan, and it's good to see you. A couple of things. We know, of course, that everybody in America will eventually be a billionaire. That's the dream they sell everybody. So that's probably why people are, imagining that one day they'll have this problem, which, of course, they won't. But I did hear her this evening at Savannah State, or it's in Savannah. I'm thinking about the student body president of Savannah State did a great job introducing her, by the way, but the young sister. But she said, I heard her talk about the middle class and the working class. I hope some of Reverend Barbara's logic is seeping into her stump speech. But as it relates to that working class, I wonder if you have any thoughts about the fact that, like President Biden, Vice President Harris hadn't said anything about the $10,000 cap on state and local tax deductions, and realizing that many of the tax cuts that were passed in 2017 will probably stay in place. The Democrats voted, although they voted against those that tax bill, maybe some of that stuff will stay in place. But any thoughts about SALT and whether or not state and local tax and capping that exemption at $10,000 will affect the working class and the middle class?
Yeah, I know a lot of people that have very strong feelings about the SALT deductions. I do think that is a policy area that gets us out of the realm of the hyper wealthy, and that is more, in folks that are middle class, maybe getting into upper middle class and beyond. But I do think it's getting a little bit deeper into the middle class. So that's one where, there's a lot of strong opinions about it. I think that's something that we should have discussion about. But that gets into another point here in this talk of the tax code. I mean, right now, what we have is a system where we have very wealthy that are hoarding their money, and they're deciding on how they're going to spend it. And injecting these kinds of ideas, having a whole discussion that hopefully we will be having in 2025 under hopefully the Harris-Walz administration, will allow us as a country to decide on how the tax code can better reflect our priorities and make sure that it's supporting people at every income level, but especially the middle class. As long as we keep the status quo, it's billionaires that are getting to do whatever they want with the money that we are helping them generate by being taxpayers in this country. And we need to flip that script as quickly as we can.
And Morgan, final point here. I need people to understand the tax code ain't written for regular, ordinary people. Please, folks, go to ProPublica and look at how folks like Kenneth Griffin, billionaire, how he spent more than $11 million to keep the IRS from being able to do more. When you look at how these folks have used their lobbyists to weigh in and how the Republican Party does their bidding, because they have way more billionaires, frankly, the Democrats do. Folks just need to understand what's going on here. And so the regular, ordinary folk should not be doing the bidding of these rich folk, because, again, when you look at the wage gap, when you look at the fact that three individuals have more wealth than the bottom 50%, that is beyond I've seen, and enough of the rich being able to control the economic policies of this country.
Yeah, I think it's such an important point. And getting back to something Reese was saying, too, I mean, that is the game. The game is to divide us against each other and also what Greg was saying, and make us think we're going to be. That's why these don't include thresholds. That's why they want people to think that they should care about unrealized gains and capital gains. No, most people in this country are working class and desperately need the types of changes to the tax code that Vice President Harris is proposing.
All right, then. Morgan Harper, we appreciate. Thank you for clearing all of that up. And hopefully all the folks who were commenting on my Instagram now understand we're not talking about capital gains when you sell a house. No, it's for them folk who got a hell of a lot more money than you do. Morgan, thanks a lot.
Good to see you.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.